Euharlee, Georgia is a charming town that's part of Bartow County. It's approximately 50 miles northwest of Atlanta. Euharlee doesn't need skyscrapers or stoplights to stand tall. Here, the past lives close to the present, woven into every porch swing and mill beam and church bell. So take a deep breath, slow your step, and let this place tell you a story. History lives close to the surface here, and it's got a southern drawl and a good memory. So whether you're here to wander, wonder, or just catch your breath, you're in the right place. The name Euharlee is derived from the Cherokee word meaning she laughs as she runs, and it has to do with the Euharlee Creek and the sound of it as it goes through the town. It has a population of about 4,400, and it is also known as the Covered Bridge City. Meet Dana. I swear she's a sister from another mister. I promise you. This woman and we knew what we were talking about by just looking at each other. It's so wonderful to meet someone who understands and appreciates the way your mind works and the things that make your spirit move. But it's not even just her spirit, it's her heart that is here too.
Hi, I'm Dana Risky. I am the museum and the farmers market manager for the city of Euharlee. I'm also a lifelong resident here, so this is not only professional, but this is also personal for me as well. The history with the Native American families here, it's not just the recent Cherokee and Creek. The history really goes back to ancient times, like with the Etowah Indian mounds, the mound dwellers, and they built their villages up and down the rivers, and that's true here of Euharlee. And so we're trying more to learn the history of the area. And we were given some information or suggestion on reading material, which is the letters of Benjamin Hawkins. He was an Indian agent in the late 1700s. And he was exploring the rivers and communicating with the different tribes and the people that were living here. And in this area, it was a very good mixture of Creek and Cherokee. And he actually names the individuals that were living. So we have their names that were living here. But what we discovered was that this was not always called Euharlee Creek. Now, it was Euharlee, I guess in the Native American, they called this area Euharlee. But they actually called it Limestone Creek, is what it's referred to in the journals. And it details in there that it was because of the blue limestone that was in the river that they called it Limestone Creek.
This is the Euharlee Covered Bridge. This covered bridge is older than most people's family recipes, and the creek has more personality than some towns have traffic lights. Built in 1886 by Washington King, the son of famed freed slave and bridge builder Horace King. It stretches gently across Euharlee Creek, its timbers worn smooth by generations of footsteps and wagon wheels and whispers.
They were skilled architects, and they used the lattice style and the pegs you can see up there. Those are called tree nails. That's what's holding the bridge together.
While the Euharlee Covered Bridge is not the oldest in the country, it holds significant historical value as a testament to 19th century engineering and the craftsmanship of African American bridge builders in the post-Civil War South. Just beside it stands the Lowry Grist Mill, a two-story structure from the 1840s where water once powered massive stones to grind corn and wheat for the surrounding community.
Or whatever, I just kind of can't get over the legacy that people leave, and they have no idea. And what a testament to the quality of their work.
Right, it still stands today, and it was used up until the 1970s when it was closed down. And the reason they closed it down is because almost all the trucks that were hauling materials to build Georgia Power actually went over that bridge, and the trucks were so heavy that they were starting to see a breakdown. So they finally got easement to build the concrete bridge.
What is something that you feel like people don't appreciate or maybe need to have a better appreciation of Euharlee?
I think they need to appreciate their personal connections here. They take for granted, just because sometimes they're transplants to this area, that they have no personal ties. But I always joke with people when they come in, they're like, "Oh, we're not from here." I'm like, "You give me an hour on Ancestry." I'm like, "I'm going to find you maybe not to Euharlee, but to Bartow County or Northwest Georgia." We are also interconnected with one another, and I think people really underestimate how connected we are. Because as a society, we have the ability to connect with one another, but at the same time, we are so disconnected. In a time, how do I put it? We are have that ability to connect and speak to one another online, through our cell phones, everything.
The whole world.
But we're more disconnected than we've ever been with each other as individuals and as humans. So I think people taking those connections for granted, that's something I wish that people would really look more into. I think they would have more respect for one another if they did that, and there would be a lot less hate.
And that's the Euharlee Covered Bridge, built to last and clearly doing a great job of it. In this next chapter, we explore the lifeblood of Euharlee. The churches that anchored its spirit, the classrooms that nurtured young minds, and the simple, steady pace of daily life that gave this town its heartbeat. Tucked beneath the Georgia sky, beyond the hum of passing tires and the rustle of pecan trees, Euharlee has always been more than a dot on the map. It's a place where faith, education, and community came together to create something quietly enduring. The heart of the town beats strongest in its churches. Places like Euharlee Baptist and the Methodist Chapel, where Sunday morning sermons started early and potlucks stretched into the afternoon. These weren't just places of worship. They were gathering spaces and support systems, sanctuaries of song and sermon that stitched the town's soul together one hymn at a time.
Worked on. These are some of the historical Bibles and things like that some of them came from the church, some of them were donated from local families, but you can see, like, even with this one, that's a pressed flower that was left in the Bible, that has been there for we don't know how long. I think the oldest Bible we have in here is like 1830s something, and there's even sermon notes and where somebody had wrote down like scriptures and things and stuck inside the Bibles. This is the actual piece that was found, but this is the one we blew up, and it's somebody's notes that it's the text of scriptures preached at Euharlee, August 1869. So somebody had wrote down these verses, and to sit down with, my own Bible and look them up and see, like, okay, what were they contemplating and studying at that time? That's at the end of they're recovering from the Civil War at that point. There's no telling what condition this area was like, and where they were looking for encouragement. And it's just that little piece of life.
That is incredible that you have that.
And I just love the personal aspects of all of that. And these are some of our churches, that this is Oak Grove, which is just down the road. This is what it looked like before. There was a bad series of tornadoes in the 1930s. And this is what happened afterwards. It was blown away. And then this is the church that was rebuilt afterwards, which is still an active congregation today. I don't have a picture of the Macedonia church, but it's just down the road from Oak Grove. It was also blown down during the same tornado. And both churches were rebuilt within a year. And the story with this is that all of those stones came from the fields of the members of the church. They would bring them in, and then they built it. Some of the newspaper articles that I found about the rebuilding of the church, and the actual tornado that came through, it was a huge outbreak, kind of like what we've seen recently. But these are all the locations across Alabama, Georgia, and into Tennessee in 1932 that were really impacted, and talking about the death tolls and the devastation. But it also shows you how community can come together after such devastation.
All right, let's sit. We sit together.
Yeah. It's like my feet don't dangle. This is actually for a wooden bench, basically.
Yeah, and you know what? It's not like so wide here that you're kind of can't bend your knees in a good spot.
Right. So they were thinking about their people, their congregation, or whoever was building these were thinking about the people who were going to be sitting on them.
I love it.
And you can tell some of the spots that are worn, it's smooth.
I'll look down. Yeah. How many hands have touched this? How many people have sat here and prayed? How many people have sat here and cried?
Right.
Or just even spent time as a family together, in this space.
Exactly right. And the Baptist Church actually established the first school, which was Mount Perrin. It burned down in the 1890s. And then the Presbyterian had the Euharlee Institute built in the late 1890s to replace that. So each one of the churches made sure not only did they have a place to worship, but there was a place for the children to be educated in the community.
And just up the road, the schoolhouse. Originally a simple wood-framed structure, the school in Euharlee educated generations of children, some of whom walked miles down dirt paths to get there.
A bit about earlier. So this is an actual picture of the Euharlee Institute when it used to stand. It was actually built in the late 1800s. As we mentioned, we were replacing this school. So this school right here is Mount Perrin. This is the only picture that we have of Mount Perrin. We do not know the names of the students, unfortunately. And then this was actually torn down in the 1950s, and the brick building where our City Hall and Police Department is now was the school that they built to replace this one.
Why did they tear it down?
In the 1950s, there was not a lot of preservation that was going on, which is very sad because we look back with that hindsight now and think, if we could stop them, it would have been fantastic. But they would tear things down and build new. They teach it enough in school.
What did you just say about history keepers?
So as the history keepers, it is our job to make sure that we keep sharing this human experience with everybody. I know from experience having kids in school right now, they don't teach history the way that they used to teach history in the curriculum. It's not personal. And even when I was a kid, it wasn't like super personal. It was like, this happened this year, that kind of thing.
Yeah, memorize this fact.
Right. But it's our job to make it personal for them, so they realize that this impacted them, or it could potentially impact them. And things that are even recent in our lifetime that we experience, like 9/11 and things, that's history to our kids now. We need to, age appropriate wise, of course, discuss these events with them, when they could get to the appropriate age to be able to handle that information and share these experiences, because we may not see it as history, but it is very much their history. And ask the hard questions. This is the other thing. Ask the hard questions before it's too late. Because hindsight is always 20/20. There's so many things I wish now that I could go back and ask my grandparents or my mom. You can just take your video camera, your phone, whatever, and you can get it in their own words, in their own voice. Do these oral histories, ask the hard questions, and make sure you've got it on the record. So,
I love it. Well, hopefully this will help in a small way to have people kind of have an appreciation for a town that they may have never even heard of, or just drive right by. There's Cartersville, drive right by. But to be able to look at the bridge and know what the history is behind, the construction behind it, the thought behind it, you can't unknow something like that. And I always feel like, I imagine myself in that space. Would I have known how to do math like that without my iPhone?
Right.
I can barely do anything.
These churches and schools shaped daily life, but just beyond them lies a quieter, older story. One not told in pews or classrooms, but in the silence of the earth. Next, we visit the slave cemetery, a sacred ground where lives once hidden in history are finally honored and remembered. I'm Sharon, and this is History Highway, where every mile remembers.
Thank you for lasting. I was almost out of power on this phone. Look at that bike. Hey, love.
I have one more stop I'd like to make. One that deserves reverence and honor. Just beyond the quiet roads of Euharlee is an area that is not often spoken about, but it's deeply felt. It's the Black Pioneer Cemetery. This sacred ground holds the stories of those who built this town with their hands and their hearts and their hope. You're going to learn a lot about Het Powell, who is an extraordinary woman whose legacy still shapes Euharlee today. Let's listen as Dana Risky, who is the museum manager, shares more about who Het Powell was and why her name still echoes through this town's history.
So our oral history had always told us that Het Powell was the only named person there that we really knew anything about. I actually know some of the descendants of Het Powell, and several years ago, even before I started working here full time, just doing research, they asked me to research her, and I was actually already researching and building her family tree because I was fascinated with learning about this woman and who she was and what she contributed to the community. You can see in the census records, we've got some of them here, except I could not find her in the 1910 census. So you can see here, Het, this is her and her husband, and in 1900, Harry Sproul is a boarder in their house. And then this is the 1880 census, and Harry Sproul is their next door neighbor. So Harry Sproul was somebody that they had known for years as friends. Well, Het's first husband passed away sometime between 1900 and 1904 because I found their marriage certificate, Het Powell and Harry Sproul. So that's where she was. I did find her in 1910, but she's got a different last name. She's Het Sproul. And that led me to find her death certificate where she's listed as Hetty Sproul. And it says that she was about 100 years old and she died of old age, and she is not buried in the Pioneer Cemetery. She is actually buried in what's called Drummond Hill Cemetery. It's not far from here. Very important cemetery as well. And it always bothered me with Het was why her family chose to bury her there even after she was freed, and they'd already established their own church, which was over near Drummond Hill. And it made me feel so much better to know that she's buried in Drummond Hill, because that's also known as the Good Family Cemetery, and that's what her descendants are. That's all her family that is buried there. And we're planning on amending our memorial that's out there and rededicating it, but we actually want to rededicate it to the Pioneer Cemetery and Drummond Hill. So we want to make sure that there's a proper memorial, not just for the Pioneer Cemetery, but also Drummond Hill. She may not be buried in the Pioneer Cemetery. She has helped us preserve the history of the Pioneer Cemetery. Her descendants have helped us preserve that cemetery and pass on the history. And if we can't find the names of these individuals, she is just a beautiful representative of those unnamed individuals that are buried not just at the Pioneer Cemetery here, but at Drummond Hill, because there's many, many individuals that are unnamed that we do not have records for. I'm thankful that the person keeping the church records saw fit to write them down by name. So they're not just a check mark or just listed as servant or slave. They dignified them at least enough to write their name down. And some of them actually have the relationship, like it says, the mother and her children. So we're extracting these names from the church minutes. We can look back and we can judge really harshly on history, because there was some really some deplorable things that happened. Instead of looking back in judgment, let's take it and let's learn something from it. Because I am one of those firm believers in, if you don't learn about your history, you're going to repeat it. Let's learn from their mistakes, their bad choices. And my favorite thing is to say, when you know better, you do better. We can do that with our history too. We can look back and definitely say, man, I wish they hadn't done that. But now we know better. We should expect ourselves to do better. We need to hold ourselves and each other to that higher standard of knowing better and doing better as we move forward.
More than 300 African Americans are believed to be buried here, enslaved people who lived and died nearby, their stories often left out of textbooks, but never erased from the land.
One of the new things with the Presbyterian Church, one of our ongoing research that we're doing, which a lot of people may not know this, they know about the what we call the Pioneer Cemetery, which is the enslaved cemetery that's between the trees. And the story on that has always been, the history is that there was two named individuals that were buried there, and that was Het Powell and Jim Scott. And that was known because of oral history that had been passed down and family stories. And thankfully it was saved. It was almost turned into a parking lot. And Miss Mary Ellen Taft, when we go in the other room, you'll see her or hear her oral history is playing. She literally and figuratively stood in front of the bulldozer and was like, no, I remember this is a cemetery. And she got with the family members. A lot of the descendants still live here. And this was around 2000 that this was happening, and they saved it. And then the Boy Scouts came in and helped clean it, which we actually have a grant to take GPR through there. We've done it partially already with the walkways that are there to make sure that we wasn't going over any of the grave sites. But there will be GPR that's eventually taken over the whole cemetery, so we can have a better count and an idea of where the cemetery borders actually are.
These were human beings, mothers and fathers, and daughters and sons, whose labor built the foundations of Euharlee's prosperity. And their stories were not written in the books of the powerful, but their legacy is inscribed in the very land they toiled and the homes that they built, in the hands of generations that followed. Visiting this place is to say, you were here, you mattered, you are not forgotten.
It's where you take history and make it personal for people instead of it being just something that happened to somebody at some point in time. And they can really start to see themselves in the history that they're
Exactly what
learning.
History Highway is all about.
Yes.
It's the same thing.
And that's what we're trying to do here. I've been here.
Euharlee surprised me. It's a town held together by old bridges and old churches, and even older stories, some whispered, some almost lost. But they're still here. In the creak of the wood, in the hush of the pews, and in the silence of unmarked graves. And I guess as I learn to honor the pieces of myself in my own past, I'm learning how to honor places like this too. Places like this remind me of why I ride, to listen, to learn, and to honor the names we remember, and especially the ones we almost forgot. We can each remember, history isn't just what's been written down, it's what we choose to carry forward. Thanks for riding with me on this stretch of History Highway. Until next time.